Right then, in this video I'm going to give you a bit of a look at my new Bluetti EB150 power station. You can see here me unboxing it, and I'll take you through why I chose this unit over other high capacity power stations, and also over the self-build or DIY route with your own components. First up, the unit's well packaged. I bought it directly from Bluetti. Delivery took a little over 1 week, I think. Bluetti is a Chinese company. Some people seem to be concerned about this. Personally, I wasn't. The process was smooth. I contacted them about delivery date at one point. Got a response the next day. No problems at all. So you get the usual warranty paperwork and manual that you'd expect with any new product. And within the box, you'll also find the power brick and the solar cables. The power brick is a fairly big and hefty unit, quite a chunky one, probably chunkier than some others that are available for other power stations. And then the solar input cables are the usual MC4 through to Bluetti's standard 8mm input plug. So let's take a look at the unit itself. Depending on your point of view, you might like this or you might not. It's a pretty unusual looking thing. It's got a good solid metal body and tough plastic at both the front and the rear. And the controls are via nice physical buttons. You've got power on and power off. And on the screen, you can see the wattage in and out. And you've got that 5-block indicator to tell you how much power you've got. You've got DC and AC buttons on the front of the unit. And then lower down, you've got 4 fairly low power USBs and a good USB-C to C power delivery port, as well as the usual 12 volts and the solar input. And then on the rear of the unit, we have our two 230 volt AC power sockets. And what about charging it up? So use the same input socket as you would for solar input. And if we go to the wall socket, we can see that after you turn it on and it revs up, you get to about 235 watts being pulled from the wall socket. And then when we look at the unit itself, we can see 215-ish watts, so about 10% loss, which is pretty standard really. And yet, if you listen, you can hear some fan noise. It's fairly noisy, probably on the louder end of the spectrum. So I guess the next question is, why the Bluetti EB150? Well, I knew that I wanted a power station that would deliver over 1,000 watt hours. And I also knew that I wanted one of the, what I think of as the name brands. And that meant looking at the Jackery 1000, the Bluetti EB150, and the EcoFlow Delta, all of which felt like they were sort of broadly in the same territory. And I looked at their capacity in watt hours, their cost, broke that down as pounds per watt hour, the maximum amount of AC wattage they could deliver, something to help me understand how long they would last, and I used the manufacturer's estimated cycles to 80% capacity, how long it would take to charge off AC, and what I could find out about whether they had a car charger or not. And then what I've called intangibles, other things that I might like or not like about a particular power station. So how do these different units do? Well, when it comes to capacity, the Bluetti EB150 is the winner with 1,500 watt hours. And it's also the winner on cost at 899, and I think you can get it cheaper than that sometimes. And that adds up to 60 pence per watt hour, which is clearly better than a little over a pound for either the Jackery or the Delta Flow. If we look at the max AC wattage that the unit can put out, well, the Delta is going to win on that front, 1800 watts versus 1000. And for me, that was actually quite important, as I would be able to use a coffee machine, but I found a way around that. And then when it comes to the number of cycles, the Delta and the Jackery are clearly quite a way behind the Bluetti. On AC charging time, clearly the EcoFlow wins by a wide margin. So if that's important to you, then that's going to be significant. And again, both the Jackery and the EcoFlow provide a car charger, and in this case, the Bluetti does not. What about intangibles? Well, the Jackery is kind of chunky. It's got all of its ports front facing, which I think looks great and works well. The Bluetti looks interesting. It sort of looks like a vintage scientific piece of kit that you might use for detecting some kind of weird radiation in a good way, I think. Um, and it's got nice clicky physical buttons. Everything about it makes me think it's going to last for a good long time. Um, and then the EcoFlow looks great. Looks like a nice modern unit. It's got the best screen out of all of these. And if you want things like that, you've got an app interface for your mobile. You've got wireless charging. A serious downside for me is it's got ports, cables sticking out of three sides. So you've got cables on the front, you've got AC on the back, and you've got charging to one side. So you would have wires sticking out of three different sides. So the next question is, which of these different measures are most important? And for me, the capacity was significant. It's half as much, again, capacity as the Jackery. It's a bit more than the EcoFlow unit. The cost of a watt hour is outstanding, frankly, at 60 pence per watt hour. That's pretty much what you were likely to spend on a battery alone, if you buy a expensive name brand battery, of course. And then we come to the max AC wattage. Now, the main reason I wanted the ability to use more than 1,000 watts was to enable me to run my little espresso machine while away camping. And ultimately, I decided that wasn't worth an extra £400. And what's more, there are alternative ways of doing that, which I'll talk about later in the video. And then the next question was whether it would be better to buy a power station at all, or whether it would be better to go self-build. And my initial thinking was that I wanted to buy the components and put it together myself. But when I really sat down and compared these things together, from the point of view of the power station, what was persuasive was you get everything you want in a much smaller unit. You've got one warranty, so if anything goes wrong, you've got a supplier to deal with rather than lots of suppliers. I've got solar, AC input, 12 volt and AC output, which I need at a level that I can work with. And it can be used in my van or in my house if I want to, and I do. I charge it up with solar and use it at home on a fairly regular basis. On the flip side, if you go for a set of components, you're going to want a battery, an MPPT, DC charging of some sort. You're going to need an inverter. You're going to need to spend a surprising amount of money on cables, fuses, bus bars, and a control panel, and all sorts of other bits and pieces. And when I compared the two together, if I was going to go for a sort of Victron level, it was going to cost about double the amount. In fact, more than that. If I was going to go at a sort of mid price, I could get down to close to the cost of the EB150, but still more. And I really had to go for lead acid and very basic components to find a way of making it cost less. On the flip side, you get the system that you want, that you've designed, and building stuff is fun. I know there's lots of different views about this. Let me know in the comments what you think. So the next question is, what else can you do with one of these units? Well, I want to cook in the camper van, so can you use an Instant Pot? And the answer is yes, you can. Medium-sized Instant Pot uses a little less than 1,000 watts. And what about an induction hob? So I bought this Vango Sizzle induction hob, which uses just about 800 watts to cook, and will allow me to boil water, cook, fry things, that kind of thing, and crucially will allow me to make a cup of coffee. So when it comes to making a cup of coffee, why can't I simply use my little Lavazza Modo Mia, which doesn't take up much space and makes a great cup of coffee? Let's turn it on and see. And straight away, pretty much, we can see that we've got an over wattage error. So the EB150 can't run at the 1600 watts that are required. But this little unit here, my Vango, can, and it can do that with a Bluetti coffee machine.
So let's start making some coffee. I've already put in the water and the coffee. So if we turn the unit on, you'll notice that the fan starts up right away. Quite a loud fan. And let's turn up the power. So straight up and onto full power. And we can hear now the Bluetti fan has kicked in. And we can see that on full power, the little induction hob is pulling roughly fairly consistent 800 watts as shown on the Bluetti control panel. And if we make our way round to the back and have a look there, we can see pretty much the same story, fairly consistent 800 watts. Okay, so we've been going for perhaps a little over a minute. The pot is very hot to the touch, and the coffee is just starting to come through. So what I do at this point is just slightly turn down the heat down to number 3, and I'm aiming just to run the coffee through. Now what we can see here is that when the Vango is down to number 2, you can see the watts cycling between around about 450, 460, and then back down to 80 again. So you can see that at the high temperatures the Vango actually changes the amount of power it's drawing, and at the lower temperatures it does the same thing by cycling between high and low power. Okay, that's just about it, so I can turn off. So okay, let's see how many watts did the machine pull. So the fan has turned off now, it's powered down, so we're just looking at the residual wattage for it to know that it's turned on really. And if we click through, we can see 0.04 kilowatt hours, so somewhere between 40 and 45 watt hours have been used. Okay, for this video I'm going to try making some noodles using the same Vango Sizzle induction hob and my Bluetti EB150. So just simply turn the induction hob on, hear the fan start, whack it up to maximum. Straight away we can hear the fan come on from the unit, and we should be able to see that pretty much exactly 800 watts is being consumed. So we'll let that come to the boil. So I'm going to pop some vegetables in there first of all. Mix of broccoli and some spring onions, and then I will add my noodles. Let those get used to themselves and come back up to the boil. Okay, so it's back up to the boil, so I will reduce this down to 2 just to keep it simmering away. And you'll notice it being an induction hob, the temperature changes quite quickly, and also you can see that it's adjusting its temperature by cycling between on and off. And that's about it really. I should turn off the heat. And let's take a look at the amount of watts that have been used by the system. So we can see there just about that the system has used 0.1 kilowatt hours. In other words, it's used about 100 watt hours, maybe a little bit over, towards 110, to boil the water, cook the vegetables and the noodles, and get it ready to eat.
So where does that leave us? Well, I think I've got a nice little unit here that is going to work well in a future van build. In the meantime, it's a useful thing for me to have. And ultimately, I guess, if I'm looking at what I'm actually going to do with it, I've got about a week and a half of running my fridge that I have in my camper van. And if I want to use it for that and powering various devices, and in particular as a source of heat for making coffee and a bit of cooking, I think I'm going to get just about a long weekend out of it. But I can extend that fairly easily with a little bit of solar. So I think the Bluetti EB150 is going to work well for us.